Hello and welcome to episode 239 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. My name is Mark. I am the Green Tank, and I am joined, as always, by Neil in the Orange Tank.
Hello.
And Kellen the Red Tank.
Hello. And loyal listeners, do you hear something different in Nealon's voice?
Yes.
Can we make COVID jokes?
I mean, I think we can when it makes my voice sound as hilariously stuffy as it does right now, so...
I have two words.
Yeah.
Superior genes.
Wow. Wow.
You know how many times and how long I was
licking banisters. Yeah.
Touching Nealon, very close to him, very close, faces close, mouths close.
Yeah.
I am clean as can be.
Yeah.
I am also clean as can be, but I didn't even get a chance to rub up against Nealon or Kellen because, unfortunately, I had a pretty serious family emergency at the last minute, so I did not make it to Gen Con as the two fellas did. So for this episode, I am going to be letting my jealousy come out in full display and asking them about all the super cool games that they got to try out, some games that I had circled that I was interested in, and also give them a chance to talk about the games that jumped out to them. But before the fellows regale us with their tales of Gen Con, we're going to be talking about the games that we played, be it at Gen Con or, as in my case, other places. Kellen is going to start off.
Not at Gen Con.
Not at Gen, certainly not at Gen Con. Kellen is going to start us off with Cat in the Box, one of his most anticipated games of the convention. I'll follow that up with Formosa Tea, which was on nobody's most anticipated list. And Nealon will wrap us up with Twilight Inscription, another hot game at the Gen Con convention. So, Kellen, why don't you start us off with Cat in the Box?
I would say that Cat in the Box was at least in the top 2 or top 3 most desired games at Gen Con. I will say that is a combination of two things. Actually, this is great because only one person can confirm or deny because this is about quantum physics or quantum entanglement or something.
Let me tell you about Schrodinger's cat, Mark.
Yeah.
The only quantum I know is Quantum Leap.
Ooh.
It's got Bacula.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Nice. I like it.
I don't know
Get
what
that,
just happened.
Kellen?
No,
Yeah,
that's a joke for old people. I'm hearing a joke for old people. This is Cat in the Box. It is a quantum trick-taking game. I saw a hilarious thread of people on Reddit today arguing that it has an amazing theme. I find the whole discussion about how theme in board games, it's actually the setting, but no, it's the theme, and back and forth, just so dumb. Words evolve, people. And in board games, theme means, is Frodo Baggins in the game? Is Darth Vader there? Can I play as Gandalf in this game? If you check yes the box, then you have theme. All right. Cat in the Box is a quantum trick-taking game that is quite unique and one that I was very excited about. It is a re-release by Bezier Games where they took a game from Japan and re-released it in a snazzier production with a cuter cat on the front of the box, and it was very cute. I was, before we got onto the sort of quantum stuff, sort of saying that games at Gen Con that do well are flashy. And when you have a pile of cats in boxes, people want to buy them. Okay? People want cats in boxes. In addition to that, they want good gameplay. And luckily, Cat in the Box delivers on both. But the key conceit of Cat in the Box is that none of the cards have a color on them. They are all just numbered, and when you play them, you are declaring what color you are playing. And you are essentially, for that round or that hand, blocking other players from playing that color with that numerical digit by putting a little chit on a tracker. For the rest of this hand, no one can play a blue 6 because you played the blue 6. And then, Mark, you have to decide, right? Your hand is all black cats. You have to decide whether you are going to play blue, right? Based on whatever blue is available. You must have that number in your hand. So if you have a 7, a black 7, you can play that and cover up the 7 blue. But if there is no number in your hand that corresponds to blue, you actually will have to go off suit. But what's interesting about the game, and it's only interesting if you understand trick-taking games, is that normally you are like, oh, oh, Neelan's out of yellow, and for the rest of the game, you're trying to exploit the fact that Neelan is out of yellow. But in Cat in the Box, you actually get to decide when you are quote unquote out of a color because it's a strategic decision that you make versus one that the game forces you to make because, again, all your cards are black. They're all cats. They're all going in Schrodinger's box. They could be this. They could be that. Red is the trump color. Red always wins. That's a saying. We can say it here. Red always wins. And the only other little wrinkle is that at the beginning of the round, you bet 1, 2, or 3 the amount of tricks that you want to win. If you get your bid, you then score bonus points equal to an adjacency area control game on the board based on where you had placed your chits. So if you played a 5 blue and that's next to the 6 red in orthogonally adjacent line, whatever your biggest block is, you will score that many bonus points. That is how you play Cat in the Box. I am not sure that I'm good at explaining Quantum Trick-Taking, the most thematic game I have ever played, ever, dripping with theme. But Neelan, what did you think of Cat in the Box?
Yeah, I liked it. I think this is another game in the line of trick-taking games we've spoken about a lot recently where this jumps over the hurdle of me not really loving traditional trick-taking card games. It reminds me a little bit of Ghosts of Christmas, where the appeal of like the puzzle layer that's like put on top of the trick-taking mechanic is the appeal. Trying to wheedle your way through finding the right color and the right number to play to both do well in the trick and enhance your little grouping of chits, that's great. It's a little bit of a double twist that I think neither mechanic would work just as well on its own. But like having to work both of those out together in the context of both one hand and the game at large, I think just makes it great.
Yeah, I think Ghost of Christmas is a great reference point. What's the hot take? Is this better or worse than Ghost of Christmas?
Hard to say. I played more Ghosts of Christmas. I kind of played half a game of Cat in the Box in the context of Gen Con just because I was bopping between tables at that particular point. But that's actually a tough call. I have a lot of issues with the scoring in Ghosts of Christmas where Cat in the Box kind of felt a little bit more straightforward in terms of like how that connects to the game at large. So I don't know. I guess the jury's out, but I definitely want to play more Cat in the Box. That's for sure.
I think that I prefer this to Ghost of Christmas, but I'm not sure I prefer it to things like American Bookshop or even just simpler trick-taking games. I do think that it's a little bit fiddly. It's a little bit of like, imagine every card that you play, you have to mark on a chart, and then you have to place it on like a card in front of you so that people even know what color it is. So there's just a little bit of more going on here. But again, I do think the game earns it, and I am happy to own it, and I think it's quite clever. Excited to have Cat in the Box. Excited to have purchased that at Gen Con 2022. Mark, sorry you weren't there.
I'm sorry I wasn't there either.
And that is Cat in the Box by Bezier Games.
I got a chance to play a game that I've heard referred to as a diamond in the rough. This is Formosa Tea by Chulan Kao, and one of the last games, I believe, published by TMG before they shut their doors. I've heard Formosa Tea referred to as viticulture for tea, and while there are
teens
a few, for tea, T-E-A,
because they can't have the wine, so
that's true. Yeah. I know there are a lot of teens who love to play viticulture, except for the wine thing, the age restriction there. But
I don't let my teens play viticulture.
That's right.
Promotes amoral behavior.
Yeah, so instead, send them over to Formosa Tea. So it's been compared to viticulture. There are some similarities. I'm not sure I completely agree that it's super similar, but it's a good starting off point in describing it. So in Formosa Tea, you are going to be harvesting tea, processing it, and selling it to either domestic or overseas markets for points. This is the most obvious comparison to viticulture, where in that game you are planting grapes, processing them into wine, then selling them. And while both games use worker placement, that's pretty much where I think the comparisons end mostly. Formosa Tea has this interesting aspect where you can place your workers in one of three areas. So you can place them in the fields to harvest the tea from the fields to your own personal board. You can place them in markets where you're going to sell the final processed tea. Or you can put your workers into factories to actually process the leaves that you acquired from the fields. And it's the way that the workers in the field interact with the workers in the factory that I think is the most interesting aspect of Formosa Tea. So in order to get tea ready to sell, the worker that's in the factory has to move the tea up through a number of different steps to process the tea. And the only way that they move up these steps is if anyone places a worker in a corresponding field to harvest the tea. So what that means is if I want to process my black tea, and there's black tea, oolong tea, and green varieties of tea. But if I want to process my black tea, I need to put a worker in the factory, the black tea processing factory, and then I need to either place a worker...
That's what it's called? The black tea processing factory?
Yeah, that's the official name of it. So it's very clear in that respect. So I need to place the worker in the black tea processing factory, TM, and then I need to either place a worker in the black tea fields myself or hope one of my opponents do. So that's the way the tea is processed. You put the worker in the factory and then you have to have workers work those fields in order to push the worker up the processing factory and process the tea. Not sure how that works thematically, but that's how it works in the game.
He's shouting encouragement to the workers down below.
That's right. That's right. The workers in the factory can't get going unless there's people in the fields in the background cheering them on. So anyway, it's this interesting sort of shared infrastructure thing, though it's not so much shared as the only players benefiting the action are the ones that are in the factory, but it does make you think about where you should place your factory worker, because if you want to start processing, say, green tea, are you going to need to do that yourself by placing your own workers in the green tea fields, which you might not want to do otherwise? Or are the green tea fields juicy enough for one of your opponents that you can count on them to do the work? So it's a consideration you need to make. There are a number of other aspects to the game as well. There are tech trees where you'll be able to process your tea more efficiently and potentially aid to your game end scoring. There are local markets and overseas markets to sell the tea to. There are event cards that add some variety to the game, but that are shown to everyone at the beginning of the game, so there aren't any event card surprises that you get in a lot of games that have event cards. One of the players I played this with likened it to another game, Terramara, and I can see that comparison. Terramara is a game that has an interesting twist on worker placement, and you get that in Formosa Tea. It's also a game where you have a lot of mini puzzles sort of going on at once. There's the puzzle of how to acquire the tea. There's the puzzle of the most efficient way to process it, and then how and when and where to sell that processed tea to the market. So despite the fact that you don't get that many turns in Formosa Tea, it is brain-burning enough that our games went about 2.5 hours for a 3-player game. I think the box says 40 to 90 minutes or something absurd like that, and I think that's not what you're going to get when you play Formosa Tea. I liked it. It scratches the cube conversion itch with enough twists and variety to make it interesting. That said, even with that, I'm not sure how often I'll be clamoring to play it again. But if you like cube conversion, if you like recipe fulfillment style games, if you want a fresh take on worker placement and like brain burnery puzzly style games, I'd certainly recommend at least giving Formosa Tea by Chulan Cow and TMG a shot.
Okay, Mark, I have a review here from BGG that I want you to confirm or deny.
Okay.
It felt...
What about the title of the tea factories?
No. But I could gotcha on that, but I'm choosing to be above that.
A gentleman.
It felt like viticulture, but was more tea focused than viticulture was wine focused. That's on BGG. No.
Oh God, I don't know if I know enough about the winemaking or tea making industries to know how well they tie into either of them. So it's hard for me to answer that. I'm gonna have to give that one a pass, unfortunately.
That's a shame.
Yeah, I don't know if this felt especially tea making, but I don't know if viticulture feels especially winemaking to me. I think viticulture's production sort of lends it to making me feel like I'm making wine. The way that you have those crush pads in viticulture and you're crushing the wine down, sort of cool. Formosa Tea, not so much. It does feel in that way more cube conversion-y, but you know, it's not dripping theme. It doesn't have a Gandalf in it or Cthulhu to make it really sing. So, but it's a fun medium heavy cube conversion worker placement for sure. Just I don't know if it's that exciting that I'm going to be itching to play it any more times, but it's solid. Certainly solid. I think for some people who that's their type of game, who love the even Uwe Rosenberg sort of like cube conversion, you know, grow something, make it to something else, will really like this. But for people who aren't really into that kind of game, definitely try it before you buy it, I think.
By a complete coincidence, I just happened to buy another game by this Taiwanese studio today, Dadao Chang, which was recommended on Twitter. So I'm looking at the art for this. Like, it's got a similar sort of vibe. I believe it's the same artist as well.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to play a game for a long time. That game is out of print, right?
I think the second edition is either the most recent edition, but I'm not sure how recently like that print run has been.
I've been looking for that game. Yeah, I'm curious to hear how you like
cool.
it.
Yeah, we should give it a go.
It's funny. I've bought and sold that game already
That's funny.
without playing it, so I have no vote.
Nice.
So I'm going to be talking about Twilight Inscription, which, while I will definitely acknowledge that Cat in the Box was one of the hardest games at Gen Con, I think it's hard to deny that Twilight Inscription seemed like the one that was the buzziest.
I think only because it sold out.
Totally. And I think that's exactly right. But I think you got a couple of things working in Twilight Inscription's favor here, right? It's a Fantasy Flight game. It's Twilight Imperium themed, which is obviously a massive property for them. It's a very unusual product, so a roll and write themed around Twilight Imperium. And yeah, like you said, it just sold out very, very quickly. So by Friday, it was impossible to get this without being on the floor within 2 minutes, which for most people, almost impossible. I was fortunate enough to play Rubica in our Discord's copy at our meetup. We had a massive 8-player game going. That is the most players that this game supports, which is kind of crazy right out of the box. What this game is effectively 4 roll and writes in one. I think it behooves you to look at any pictures you can find of this setup because it is pretty absurd. It's 4 laminate sheets, 1 labeled navigation, 1 labeled warfare, 1 labeled industry, 1 labeled exploration, I think. And all of these are like slightly different mini games that on any given turn, you're going to choose one of those sheets to participate in. So your active sheet. So a card is flipped up at the beginning of a round, which is like the event for the round, and it will typically say choose an active sheet. Then you're going to roll some dice, and using the symbols on the card and using the symbols on the dice later, you're going to mark off symbols on your sheets. Now, all of these work slightly differently. So we can go through them very briefly. Navigation, you're moving across the galaxy. You're claiming systems. You're getting assets. Generally, what you're trying to do across these boards is circle these assets, which then can be used in other boards to accomplish other things. In exploration, once you've navigated to certain planets, you can use those planets to explore them for more assets. Those assets can be used on your warfare board, say, to deploy units. You have 2 tracks, 1 for the player on your left, 1 for the player on your right, and at regular intervals in the game, 4 times exactly, a war will be triggered with both your neighbor on your left and your neighbor on your right. Whoever of you has the most strength gets a reward. Then finally, there's this industry board where assets are going to be sort of cumulatively acquired in order to get points and votes. Because one of the other cool things that happens in this game is 3 times during it, there will be a vote phase. Now, if you're familiar with Twilight Imperium, this is going to sound pretty familiar, but it works similarly in this, where there is a major agenda that comes into play, and it has 1 effect if it passes and 1 effect if it fails. And everyone around the table is going to use the votes that they've accrued to determine which way this agenda goes. And some of these are really quite fun. Some of them are rule-breaking. Some of them are like, game-altering or just major events that massively affect some players more than others. And the intent is that you're going to be talking around the table, trying to figure out how to spend your votes optimally so that you're not wasting them all by the end of the game.
So is the idea like that I've invested too much in exploration and then one of the votes is going to help everybody sort of like get ahead in exploration, but it's not going to help me, so I want to like corral everybody into a different
Exactly. Yeah, totally. So, and that's kind of it. It's like you're not going to be able to be a substantive weight for all 3 of those votes, right? No one player can have all that power. So the idea is that you're going to find the right time and the right agenda to like either convince people, no, hang on, you don't have like a good, strong feeling one way or the other, so like help me out here, I'll use my votes down the line, etc. So it's got that little bit of built into it, but some of that is going to be very group dependent. And I think that gets to the heart of some of my feelings on Twilight Inscription in general, and that is going to be very group dependent, because I don't know that this is necessarily for people that are diehard fans of Twilight Imperium. I'm looking at you, Mark, someone that has said to me, like, this is a great game. I love the experience of an 8-hour epic 4X experience. That's not what Twilight Inscription is. Twilight Inscription is a 2-hour roll and write. But it is a 2-hour roll and write that at the very least incorporates some elements that are appealing about Twilight Imperium. At the very least, the theme. At the very least, the factions. It has asymmetric factions, which actually have very meaningful differences between them in terms of like the boards they apply to. The thing that is appealing about it to me, as someone that likes the roll and write genre, is I get this genuine sense that there is something exciting about trying the different routes, focusing on the different boards each game I play of it. I had a great time with this, despite it being a 2-hour game. You know, and I think part of that can't be dismissed, which is like this group experience, this 8-player extravaganza, you know? Not everyone came away loving it. I would say half of the table was like, I don't know. Some people that were Twilight Imperium fans didn't quite get it. And on the flip side, there were people that were just like so into everything it was offering because it's just so unique and it's so weird.
All right, Mr. Salesman. All right, Mark. I'm gonna sell you this game in two things. Okay, he just did all of that. 2 things. Now, Exhibit A. You ready? I'm a salesman and a lawyer. Exhibit A: orange markers, orange paint markers, right? These roll and write boards are like black, and you've got this crazy orange marker. You ain't never written with something like this, okay? Exhibit B, okay? Giant, chunky, translucent dice that are quite beautiful.
You ain't never rolled something like this.
You ain't never held something like that in your hands and rolled those onto a table.
I do want to be careful here, though, because this isn't going to solve the problems that people have with roll and writes, right? It is not an incredibly interactive game. There are
Exhibit A or Exhibit B?
Exhibit C in this case, I suppose. There are distinctly 7 points of interaction in the whole game. You know, 4 wars, 3 votes, and for the rest of the time, nothing you're doing is affecting any other player.
Do you find yourself like looking at what people are doing or not so much?
Very important you do, actually, because especially in the context of a war, right? Because if you see that the player next to you is very heavily over militarizing, you might just be like, I'm not going to bother. Like, it doesn't matter how much you beat me by. I know you're going to beat me. I'm not going to waste my resources on warfare. Sure. And so it does feel a little bit more like an arms race. There's no point overspending on military, but at the same time, you can easily get the edge up on your neighbor. And especially in the later wars, the point advantages are worthwhile, but that's not direct interaction. That is just, you know, my board versus your board. I got points, you didn't. Haha. But I think in the context of what it is, which is to say it is very much a heavy roll and write, it has the things that I find satisfying about that genre. You know, the Kanchon clever, like this track triggers this ability. I'm going to use this asset to get this technology on this, which allows me to do this over here. It's triggering cool stuff like that in a way that really I dug. I don't know that this is going to have legs, but I want to play more of it.
Seems like at the very least much better, I would say, than the other heavy roll and write game we played, Roman Roll.
Yes, I will say this definitively. And there was a lot of comparison throughout the weekend to Hadrian's Wall, which I want to say I haven't played. But this is my favorite heavy roll and write. In fact, this is the only heavy roll and write that I think works for me so far.
How do you think this game would fare with fewer players in terms of quality of the game and in terms of just playtime, out of curiosity?
So it is almost entirely simultaneous, so I wouldn't expect the player count to affect all that much. The only thing, obviously, is more players means more people potentially slowing the game down. It is maybe the only thing I could say to that. You probably don't want to play this with 2 or 3 players. I think you actually even have to play with an AI, I think, at 2 players. But I think with 4 players, it would be totally fine.
It's like the beginning of your setup, Neelan, right? Because they had 8 players and 2 giant-ass tables, right? Because no one table could have all that power on it. And at the beginning, it felt like because we were over on another table, like being civilized, playing normal games. It felt like they were starting like Sidereal Confluence. At the beginning, I was like, oh, like I'm in the wrong table, you know, and then about 1 hour in or 2 hours in, I look over and they're all just heads down, like literally playing a roll and write game. And I'm like, oh, I'm at the right table. But I will say, I do want to play this. I do. And I do think that somehow that 8-player in a convention experience probably helped you a little bit.
Absolutely.
If that's what Mark's sort of alluding to, perhaps.
And I wanted that to be my finishing point, which is, I probably played this under the best possible circumstances, right? I can already see the scenario where I show this to friends and it's just a much less exciting affair. I think there is still something gimmicky and experiential about it that I'm still excited to show people, but I don't know that it's going to have the same appeal, especially even after that first showing. But again, still excited to play it, excited to play the different factions, try different ways around it. It's a neat thing. That is Twilight Inscription.
Before we get into talking about the games that these guys played at Gen Con, a heads up that the next convention that we'll hopefully all be at next is Shucks. So this is Shucks 22, which is taking place in Vancouver. We're going to be there. This is taking place September 30th through October 2nd. I was super bummed that I missed Gen Con, but Shucks is going to be a heck of a consolation because I had a great time the last time we went to Shucks, which was, I guess, 3 years ago now since it's been down for COVID and the pandemic. But yeah, if you guys want to see us, we are going to be, I think, officially guests of honor. We'll be doing some things at the show. There will be a math trade. There'll be a bunch of stuff going on. It's a very player-driven convention, not so heavy on the sales of games, but way, way more geared towards people actually playing games, which I really loved. And Shucks 2019 was where we played, for me, a very memorable game of Masters of Commerce / Panic on Wall Street with listeners. That was super, super fun. So hopefully we'll be making more memories. But yeah, Shucks 2022 taking place in Vancouver, September 30th through October 2nd. We'll be there. We hope you're there. You guys excited?
Very.
Yes, very excited. And obviously a huge thank you to Shut Up and Sit Down for inviting us back and to Canada for allowing us back into their country.
We think. We hope.
We hope.
We'll see.
Or 2 out of 3 of us.
Hey, I'm always welcome in all of the Queen's countries, so
That's true.
I don't know about the rest of you.
We're a loyal subject. Okay, so let's get into talking about the games that these guys played at Gen Con. I think the way that I'd like to do this is to ask you about games that I heard about. I was maybe especially envious about hearing you guys played at the convention. And then maybe if you want to throw in some other games that maybe I missed that you'd like to highlight, you can do that. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, I have heard that there might actually be a Splendor killer out there, and it comes in the form of Splendor itself. That's right, Splendor Duel, which I did not know anything about. You guys both played this, am I correct?
That's
Yeah.
right.
So tell me about Splendor Duel.
All right. So the first thing that's interesting about Splendor Duel is that it is designed by the original designer of Splendor, who is Marc Andre. And then also an interloper has come into the mix, Bruno Cathala, who also came into the mix with Seven Wonders to help make Seven Wonders Duel. So Splendor Duel is an odd duck because Splendor is quite good at 2 players. So we put our skeptical tank hats on and sat down for a demo of Splendor Duel. TLDR, it's great. It's really good. It changes how you collect gems by putting all of the gems out in a orthogonal grid or sort of grid of gems, and then you can only take them in one row. So either you take a row or a column or a diagonal of 3. But if you take 3 of the same type or the same color, the opponent gets a little benefit in the form of privilege token, which is unfortunately white colored. Similar to original Splendor, you cannot pick up gold unless you are reserving a card from the tableau. There's a lot more going on. There are powers attached to many of the cards so that when you build them, you get to take an extra turn. You get to take a privilege token. You can steal a token from another player. There is also another gem, a pearl, which many cards that are valuable have 1 pearl required. And then I would say the other thing that is quite novel is that there's actually 3 different victory conditions that you're going to simultaneously, which is a point total of 20, I believe, a crown total, which some of the cards have crowns on them, but not all of them, and then a single color point total, so like going really hard into one color. And I found that those 3 victory conditions really fun to try to keep in line. I will say it felt longer than Splendor. Neelan, how did you feel about the arc of Splendor Duel?
I think that's the biggest concern I have is just the length of the game in general, but I've liked everything about this. I think the thing that it does especially well is, like you said, 2-player Splendor is already great, but this is better. Like, it takes everything that is good about a 2-player game and just enhances it. It makes it all those moments like spikier. The moment where you're able to do a thing that's going to explicitly hurt the other player, those are very much exacerbated in Splendor Duel. So, for instance, like one of the key things you spoke about this grid that you're taking the tokens from. And, by the way, the tokens, although they're tiny, are still very nice and weighty. Very good Splendor chips. Very glad that that's being preserved. So when you empty that grid, or when you get to the point that you don't have any good options from that grid, one of the things you can do is just refill. And when you do that, you give the other player one of those privilege tokens. So there's this little bit of like this game of chicken going on about who's going to be the one that's going to force the refill of the grid to give the other player the token. And there's a lot of just like little gaming you can do about, okay, I'm going to, instead of taking a token, I'm going to buy a card, or I'm going to reserve a card until someone runs out of things to do and they're like, now I have to be the one to refill the bag. And that's good. It's not like a unilaterally bad thing because now you have a wealth of options, but just being the person to give the other player a privilege always hurts a little bit because they're very powerful in terms of like how you can just build momentum into like subsequent terms. And that's kind of the thing that Splendor Duel becomes more so than Splendor is just like a game of like back and forth tempo and like finding the right time to kind of like spike the ball in a way that's going to give you the advantage. It felt really, really good.
Yeah, I would say it's an immediate buy for Kellen.
Absolutely. Absolutely for me too.
So it sounds like it does feel Splendory, but it feels like better than two-player Splendor?
Yeah. I mean, that's my take at least. I think the thing that you have to be careful of though is it is Splendor but more, and I mean more stuff, you know, like Splendor is a simpler game by quite a stretch. So like if I was showing someone one of these for the first time, it would probably be Splendor, but then I would immediately say, now let's try this and see how you like it.
And you guys both have mentioned how long it goes. How long did it go? Are we talking about an hour, or are we talking about more than that?
No, it was less than an hour. In the arc of sort of cresting the hill to where, holy shit, I can get everything I want,
yeah,
you crest the hill later than in a game of Splendor.
Totally. And it's one of those things where the end of the game comes quicker than you think, but the 2/3 mark takes longer than you think. I don't know if that makes sense. It kind of feels like it's dragging in the middle and then suddenly it's over.
I see.
Mark, I have to tell you a story. And I just want to say that, you know, this is made by Asmodee, so they had, you know, very professional booth. So Nealon went off, right? So I'm playing this by myself, right? And
this is probably when he got COVID, right?
Yeah, maybe. And this is, you know, I try to be sort of like an entertaining man, you know, so I'm trying to, you know, give and take with the booth worker who's playing the game with me. So, you know, I don't remember exactly what the move was, but I remember it was very smart. So a very smart move on the board, you know, sort of gotcha'd him, you know, like, haha, man, you know, like you didn't see that coming.
Didn't see that, right?
And he deadpanned to me, Mark. He deadpanned to me. He said, you know, I'm being paid to play this with you. I was in shock at how much he got me. He was like, it was like a light bulb went off. Every other game I've ever played, no one was paid to play with me, and he wanted to make sure that I knew that, like, even if he lost, he was still getting paid, and I was getting jack.
Oh God, that is 3-dimensional Splendor, right there.
Couldn't even believe it.
Amazing.
I also beat Mike DeLisio, which I think is important to point out.
Yeah, but that's not much of an accomplishment.
Well, yeah, but it's worth saying though.
It is worth saying.
No, and then he asked for our opinions for a Dice Tower video, and then got Nealon's opinion, and then cut off the video right when I was about to talk.
What is this?
Dice Tower's Gen Con Day 1 recap.
Oh, yeah, you may have missed it, yeah.
So I'm hoping that this game also was really good, considering it is my namesake. Green Team wins. How'd that go?
Yeah, I will say that I probably want to do this as a feature in an upcoming episode. I think that every year there's got to be a party game to pick up, and Green Team Wins is 100% this year's game. I was devastated to not have left the convention with it. I think it is quite good, decent good. Again, it's like, you know, I'm thinking back to some of the ones we've gotten in the past. Crosstalk, again, quite good. Don't play it anymore. Decrypto, amazing. Still play it. Green team wins, works quite well at higher player counts, and it's one I definitely want for my collection and think you should play it.
Does it feel like it'll have more staying power? I know it's hard to tell now,
Sure.
but like in something like Snakes?
Yes.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah, I think so.
100%.
It's closer to the realm of something like a Just One or a
Yeah, I was gonna
Wavelength,
ask.
where it's like very, very accessible, very, very big group friendly, and is just breezy. You can explain the rules in 10 seconds, and then people are playing. Like,
And it has that sort of like, wait a minute, haven't I
Exactly.
played this game a bunch?
it
But
feels
in not-
familiar.
Right. In not a bad way, but in a way that's like, wow, I can't believe this isn't already a game. But we'll save that for a future episode. They call that, it's not clickbait. What do they call that?
A tease?
A tease.
A tease. So one other game I wanted to ask about is another John D. Clare design that I think isn't coming out until next year, but you guys got a chance to demo, I think. Empire's End. What did you guys think of that?
So we had a chance to try just a demo of this game that's upcoming to Kickstarter. I think this has one of the prettiest box covers I have ever seen, and really enjoyed the demo and looking forward to the Kickstarter. Empire's End is, and it's almost impossible to explain without this, but we only sort of got the reference. We actually had a chance to speak with John D. Clare, who you can only, say his name with the D in the middle, John D. Clare, which is that it's sort of like No Thanks with a bunch more added to it. So everybody has a board with a bunch of tiles, and then a event is flipped over, and the event calls for one of 3 or 4 different types of resources, and then everyone has to pay to not get by that event. And, you may run out of the resource, and so you have to take the event. You may have wild tokens that you can choose to spend or not to spend, but each sort of tile that you have has a different ability or a series of abilities and point values. And so at different points in the game, not only is the event different in terms of what the players have to bid on it, but the event is also going to affect different pieces of each player's board, meaning that it's more impactful for me to win it than it is for Neelan to lose it. And so the sort of bidding process becomes quite complicated, and complicated for obviously a lighter game. Lovely art. Can't speak to any of the production because I think we were in a prototype land, but one I am definitely looking forward to and was not on my radar walking into Gen Con. Neelan, what did you think?
Yeah, it's funny how immediately No Thanks doesn't need any of this. It's a fantastic game on its own. But then as soon as you play it in Empire's End, you do have that immediate thought of, like we were saying earlier, like, why is this not being done before? Because twisting the stakes to be slightly different for each player, because there's this little bit of, not quite tableau building, but you have a tableau that you're slowly adding stuff to, and you're risking losing parts of that. But the risk is higher for me than it is for Kellen because I've added something to the bottom of my building, or based on the placement of how I've swapped some of my tiles, it's now worth more points than it is to Kellen. So being able to look at your neighbor's board and be like, I know Neelan wants to protect this more than I want to gain it. There's just like so much little gamesmanship that the simple no thanks style bidding like gets very severely altered by, in a way that, that was cool, while still being not much more complex than like a space-based level of complexity, to compare it to another John D. Clare game.
Yep. A lot of little upgrading going on where now you're better at military and better at different things. I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now, and you're right about the box art. It's amazing. No surprise that it's by Kwanchai Moria. So, yeah, very, very cool looking.
An up-and-comer.
Right behind Ian O'Toole in that regard. I've asked you guys...
We listened to your
enough.
feedback, everyone. Just remember that.
So I've asked you about the games that I'm interested in, but there are so many games on this list. What do you guys want to talk about?
I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk about a lovely little small game that was completely new to me. This is Kites by Floodgate. This is a 5-minute filler game about flipping sand timers, but one of the best little implementations of that. Incredibly simple. The game is literally, you have 6 sand timers of different colors. Once they're all in motion, if any one of them runs out, everyone loses. This is cooperative. All you do is you play a card in turn order. You play a card that's going to have 1 or 2 of the sand timer colors on it, which means you flip both of those sand timers over. So there's this element of finding the exact right time to flip these sand timers so that, it's not right after someone else just flipped one, in which case it's going to run out immediately, and just managing those. It's a little bit like collectively spinning plates, and you're trying to run all your cards out before any one of those timers runs out. And it's just so cute. It looks charming. The art is lovely. You can explain it to someone, anyone, very, very quickly, and it has everyone very stressed out and frantic. It's challenging. It's got challenging cards that you can add to it in a way that I thought was really cool, very clever. I demoed it and immediately bought it.
Awesome.
Yeah, Mark, I think this is one you would definitely like.
It seems really fun.
The first game of the con that I got to play with a patron of the podcast, C Mage X, or I'm sure there's a better way to pronounce that, but I got to try Good Puppers, which is a 2021 card game release, so not the newest of the new, but new, pandemic new, and it immediately struck me that it was, in fact, an Asmati game, and it was, in fact, designed by Chris, who I will butcher his last name, Cieslik, who is basically, and I could be a little wrong about this, the editor of Innovation, or a Carl Chudyk sort of friend, who is listed as a co-designer on Red 7, among other things, who I think has had a hand in a lot of the amazing Carl Chudyk games. Good Puppers is a dog game, so that helps. There's cute dogs on all the carts. And it's a very simple set collecting game where you're sort of drafting. In the 2-player version, I believe there are 3 cards out, and one player takes the card they want, and then the other player gets the remaining 2 cards, gets to add one to their tableau and not use the effect, and gets to add the other to their tableau and use the effect. But it really has that fun scaling where once you have 5 German Shepherds, getting that 6th one gives you a really big ability that feels really impactful where you are scoring lots and lots of points. I don't know that it's hyper balanced, but it was very fun, and I want to play more of it. And it just had that sort of, it had this, what is that thing that's like perfume, right? And cologne, but then below that it's like
Notes of?
No, oude, homage, it's like not as good is the wrong word. It's sort of this faint scent of, the LaCroix of. No, there's a word for this.
Notes.
You guys aren't
notes
cultured.
Of.
It's not notes of. It's like a weird French
notes
word.
Notes of cherrywood.
Oude.
Notes of cherrywood.
No.
Yeah,
it's like it's a product line.
Oh my god.
It's a product. Are you not?
I mean,
just stop the show.
Like,
are you talking about
toilet, but I don't think
yeah.
that's exactly right, because that's just perfume.
That's not it.
That's not it.
Yes, it is. Maybe.
No.
Uh-huh. I don't know.
I think
don't
that's
wear
what
cologne.
you think it is, but yes.
What is the difference between eau de toilette and perfume?
I think
the strength of the fragrance.
I don't think I knew that.
Perfumes have a higher concentration.
I don't think
are
I
linked
knew
to
that.
a longer longevity.
Wait, in perfume?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
That's interesting. I guess it's like
Well,
it's just
the next one
diluted
is-
type perfume. Is that the idea?
I don't know. The next one is eau de toilette, actually toilet water.
Yeah, well, that's what it literally. That's what it literally means.
All right. But not to detract, I was quite charmed by it. And again, I may be a more recent dog lover, so there's my bias. So think about that.
Yeah, well, what's
Good-
actually
good
funny about
Puppers.
Good Puppers is I played this at Gen Con last year, and my
really?
immediate reaction was, oh, Kellen's going to hate this because of the cute pups on
What?
the thing. But we also got some of the rules wrong, so it's like there's a little bit of fuzziness. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's cute. I liked it. I want to play it again. So one thing I'm also sort of dying to talk more about, but I sort of have to hold myself back a little bit. I got to play War of the Ring, the card game, with Roberto Di Meglia, who is one of the original designers of War of the Ring and is the developer on the card game version. So this is actually being designed by Ian Brody, who I believe is more famous for Quartermaster General. Is that right? Same guy? Who's more famous for Quartermaster General. I'm not super familiar with his work, but it was just sort of...
Quartermaster General.
Yes.
Quartermaster.
Quartermaster General, exactly. I'm pretty sure I said it exactly like that, Kellen. It was just really cool to be playing this with, I'm a very recent convert to War of the Ring in general, but just unexpectedly sitting down and playing this game with him was just a fantastic experience. I'm probably going to have a lot more to say about this in the near future, so I don't want to talk about it too much, except it was very neat. I am excited to play more. The game I do want to talk about, though, is Anunnaki, which is a game that has recently just had a crowdfunding campaign, a kind of weird one because it launched, failed, and then relaunched. And I believe the second round has been totally successful. It is now fulfilling, is still available for late pledge. And I was excited to sit down and play this because even though I backed it kind of sight unseen, because this is a Simone...
Wait, you've already backed this?
Yeah.
So why did we demo it?
Because it was there, and you said, this looks cool.
That is true. I was tricked.
Actually, to be perfectly honest, I couldn't remember if I had backed it, and that is the truth. I confirmed later that I had, but yes, this was a Simone Luciani design that is very much looks kind of like it wants to play in the realm of the Come On, Rising Sun thematic minis heavy area control games that are a little bit Euro hybridy. But this is designed by one of my favorite designers, one of the designers of Tolkien, one of the famous Italian designers, as it were. And so I was very interested to see his take on a Euro-y area control game. And this seems really, really fun. I probably have more affinity for this type of mechanic than Kellen does, but like that sort of puzzle action selection where each turn is about evaluating your player board and seeing how to optimize movement of a piece in order to determine what actions you're able to take. But one of the things I thought was neat about the boards is that every player just has their own unique planet, and the resources are very limited on it. I very rarely see this where you actually just run out the resources on your board and eventually have to move to other players' boards or the shared board. So it kind of gets the sense of just the area getting more and more restricted as the game progresses. Every faction has unique powers, beautiful production. I thought this was cool. I'm excited to play this now.
It commits the worst sin that area control games can have, which is that you must solve a puzzle in order to take a turn.
The old Sudoku.
The old do a Sudoku and then you can invade Poland. I did have a good time with this demoer, who I hope was also not paid, where I asked him how quickly I could invade Neelan's territory, which was like all the way across the other side of the galaxy. And it turns out you can get there in like 1.5 turns.
Very quickly, it turns out. Did I have Vikings outside of my door? Space Vikings.
So I was entertaining the table in spite of the gameplay that we were seeing. The only other anecdote that I want to share is never have I ever felt so understood by Neelan. We had separate hotel rooms this year. Separate hotel rooms, right? No funny business. When I looked on our Twitter and I saw a picture of Neelan's pants in the freezer, and it said, I don't remember what your caption said, but I immediately ran to my mini fridge, opened the door, and took a picture and replied, and we both had freezer pants, even from afar. We were about as far away as you could be and be connected to the convention center there.
I was so desperate to be there that as soon as I saw that tweet from Neelan, I immediately took my pants off and put them in my freezer. So I was there with you in spirit.
I'm not joking. I felt a kinship.
It stuck with me, and it works. It works.
I can't think of a better way to end an episode about Gen Con than with freezer pants. So that is going to do it for this episode. If you were at Gen Con, why not tell us about the games that you liked? You can do that on our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, and more specifically in the podcast channel where we talk about this week's episode. You can find us on all forms of social media. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can chat with us in the forums of BGG at boardgamebarrage.com/forum. As always, the best ways to support the show, if you are inclined to, are to leave us a review at Apple Podcasts and or join the Patreon at patreon.com/boardgamebarrage or boardgamebarrage.com/Patreon, where we release a bunch of bonus episodes, so you can listen to those. And again, one last reminder that Shucks 2022 in Vancouver is coming up. That is happening September 30th through October 2nd. We will be there. We're very, very excited about it. I'm especially excited about it now that I've missed a big convention, so I'll be raring to go. And I think that's going to do it for the show. Until next week, goodbye.
Bye. Neelan's drinking that Diet Coke I hand-delivered to him.
Yes, thank you.
You hand-delivered a Diet Coke to him?
Yeah, I hand-delivered. I went grocery shopping. He said...
Did you really?
Yeah, well, not really. I got him
Well,
like 3 things. But
yeah.
he said he wanted liquid cough suppressant.
It's funny because in retrospect, I realized what I was actually asking for was cough syrup.
Yeah, and
But-
I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
I was like Googling it. I was like, Neelan, I don't know if they have this in America. I called my mother. She was like, oh, it's cough syrup. And I'm like, oh, that makes sense.
That was very nice of you.
No. Sorry, that's not the point of the story.
Yeah,
I was-
Okay.
let's emphasize very quickly how lovely Kellen was to me.
I don't know.
Very kind.
Well, maybe it's good because we keep getting these reviews that like Kellen's an
So that didn't really happen, right? We're just saying that so we can get rid of some of those reviews.
Yeah, thank you for just thank me a couple times per episode for doing like random acts of kindness.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Before we get into talking about
Mark, do you remember how before Gen Con you said that there was no way they would put Naz-Roka Alliance in Twilight Inscription?
I remember
And
that.
the Mahakt Gene
Don't tell me.
Sorcerers?
Have they done it?
They've done it. And the Vulroth Cabal?
No,
and the
not the Vol.
Ixchar Kingdom?
Oh, well, now you're making it up.
And the Universities of Jolnar?
Well, I knew that was
All right, that's fair. That's a given.
That's a base faction, Neelan. You idiot.
you idiot.